20 years after the story of Initial D ended, in response to environmental concerns and to prevent resource depletion, production of all internal combustion engine cars has ceased globally. Once high-performance gasoline cars are gradually exiting the historical stage. Meanwhile in Japan, a racing event called MFG has quietly emerged, serving as a requiem for these fuel cars. To date, the event has attracted over 30 million users worldwide. The only rule of the event is the grip-to-weight ratio. On the other side, Kanata Katagiri, a student of Takumi Fujiwara, has just returned to Japan. The screens at the airport were showing the MFG qualifying races. Shun Aiba from Japan, driving a Nissan GTR, was poised at the starting line. Shun fell in love with a new race angel upon seeing her this year. As the countdown ended, the GTR and the race drones sped onto the track. Kanata noticed that people around him were passionately discussing the MFG races, reflecting on the popularity of MFG everywhere. That evening, a girl named Ren was on her way home when she learned that a guest from the UK would be visiting her house that night. Ren recalled her day's work. She was the race angel at the MFG race and had rejected racer number 9, Shun, who had confessed his feelings for her. Ren considered herself not to be frivolous. However, upon returning home, Ren was instantly captivated by Kanata's appearance. The next day, Kanata visited a garage where the owner, Ogata, was watching the MFG qualifying races. Ogata had been referred by Mr. Saionji to prepare a vehicle specifically for Kanata for the MFG race. Ogata explained the MFG rule of grip-to-weight ratio to Kanata, stating that heavier cars must use thicker tires and lighter ones thinner tires, though engine power was unrestricted. This rule favored more powerful cars, often leading to those with luxury cars taking the lead. Afterwards, Ogata showed Kanata the car for the race. As the garage door rolled up, a red Toyota 86 was revealed. Ogata mentioned it was an old 3-pedal race car, but Kanata expressed his fondness for it. On his way back, Kanata unexpectedly ran into Ren, who took the opportunity to add his contact information. Ren then inquired about Kanata's purpose for returning to Japan. He revealed he was searching for his father with only a photo as a clue. Ren offered to help him in his search, touching Kanata with the Saionji family's warmth. Meanwhile, Shun visited an office trying to find out more about the race angel, but their personal information was strictly confidential. He had to give up, but noticed Kanata registering for the race. Approaching Kanata, Shun struck up a conversation and boasted about his car, number 9. Kanata was thrilled, as Shun and his GTR were also famous in the UK. Meanwhile, a Porsche 718 was continuously setting new records in the qualifying races. The driver was Michael. Kanata was not very familiar with Porsche, but he noticed this Porsche seemed smaller than the other cars. Shun explained it was a Porsche 718 Cayman. As Michael's lap times topped the charts on the mobile app, Shun was shocked. He could not understand how the Porsche 718 managed to outperform a group of supercars. Kanata visited Ogata's garage to see if there was anything he could help with. It turned out that Ogata's Toyota 86 had also competed in the MFG races before, making it easy to pass the inspection. Ogata had driven this Toyota in races, but he was better at repairing cars than racing them. The day of Kanata's qualifying race quickly arrived. The race commentator started the live coverage. It was the final day of the qualifiers. The Porsche's lap times were surpassing those of prominent supercars like Ferrari and Lamborghini, and Shun's GTR was also performing well. Hundreds of cars participated in the qualifying races, but only 15 would make it to the main race. Before the race, Ogata prepared new tires for Kanata, but Kanata asked Ogata to be ready to change the tires after the race. At that moment, Shun was caught peeking at race angel Ren by Kanata and Ogata. Shun excused himself, claiming he was there to support Kanata. Surprised to see Kanata's car was a Toyota 86, Shun, as a senior, offered some advice to Kanata. He emphasized that completing the full course was crucial in the preliminaries. The Odawara racetrack at 40 kilometers is the longest in all MFG events. Even he could not remember every detail of the track. However, Kanata mentioned he had memorized all the track details after watching the official track guide videos just 3 times. As the Toyota 86 headed towards the inspection area, Kanata and his Toyota 86 were about to start their first qualifying race. Kanata's Toyota 86 started from the starting line with an AI drone closely following for live broadcasting. The first timing section of the track was an uphill, challenging for the 140 horsepower of the Toyota. The Saionji couple guessed that Kanata was searching for his father, who had abandoned the family. In the control room, Shun believed that the Toyota 86's horsepower was insufficient for competing with supercars on the uphill segment. However, the next moment showed Kanata's position rising to 54th place. Driving perfectly along the racing line, Kanata moved up another position. The event's AI highlighted his car, indicating recognized driving skills, last marked for Michael. Shun was shocked in the control room. With over 200 cars having more horsepower, he couldn't understand how the Toyota ranked so high. Ogata speculated it might be due to Kanata's fast cornering speed, but Shun reminded him not to underestimate the grip-to-weight ratio rule, especially on an uphill where horsepower deficits should be more evident. Moreover, supercars with average performance typically benefit from this rule. Canada, however, had a different view, believing that the person who devised the rule must be very clever. The creator of the rule was Ryosuke Takahashi. Now, the Toyota 86 had moved up to 52nd place. Approaching a downhill segment, Kanata adjusted the brake balance settings, ready to pick up the pace. Astonished, Shun grew curious about Kanata's background. Kanata was satisfied with the car's tuning, and his position continued to improve to 48th place. The performance of the Toyota amazed MFG's general manager, Fumihiro, who promptly called Ryosuke. At that moment, Ryosuke was preparing for surgery. Hearing about Takumi's apprentice, he paused his preparations and instructed Fumihiro to keep a close watch on Kanata. Back to the race, the Toyota 86 was now ranked 44th. However, a mid-course uphill section caused it to drop by one position. After passing through the highest altitude area of the track, the next section was the steepest downhill part of the whole course. Kanata told Ogata he planned to speed up even more, but Shun warned that this could easily lead to an accident. Kanata reassured Shun not to worry, as the track layout was clear in his mind. As the Toyota 86 descended, its position improved with each checkpoint passed. Shun noticed that Kanata deliberately allowed some sliding through the bends, a risky technique that alarmed him. Shun quickly realized that Kanata aimed to be one of the top 15 to qualify for the main race. He instructed Ogata to start updating Kanata on how many cars away he was from the 15th position, which was all Kanata wanted to know at that moment. The Toyota 86 had moved up to 41st place and was now approaching the most dangerous part of the track, an area filled with dense fog. Even Shun had to maintain a safe distance here. At this moment, Shun finally understood that Kanata truly remembered all the routes. He could navigate the turns, even when visibility was low, knowing exactly when to enter and exit each bend. However, memorizing the track layout alone was not enough. Unlike a racetrack, real roads have various unforeseen elements. How did Kanata manage it? Suddenly, Shun recalled what Kanata had mentioned about the demonstration videos he watched. They were recorded by Keisuke Takahashi, driving a Mazda RX-7. Meanwhile, the Toyota 86, speeding through the fog, had now reached 30th place. From this position, drivers start earning points in the MFG. Earning points leads to sponsorship deals for all tires from manufacturers and provides access to amenities like rest areas for assistants and unique race car decals. The impressive performance of the Toyota 86 on the track captivated countless spectators. The commentator was eager to see if the Toyota 86 could set a new record in the winding section, where the current record holder was Michael driving a Porsche 718. Watching on TV, Michael's sister asked him what he thought about this. However, the German prodigy did not consider Kanata and the Toyota 86 a threat, believing that Kanata was merely pushing the tires to their limits for power. The upcoming part of the track was flat, and the final section included a long straight, where the Toyota was expected to lose its competitive edge. Michael stated he had never used his full potential in MFG races. Likening his mind to a gearbox, he claimed he was only in 4th gear and planned to return to Germany after winning this year's MFG championship, dismissing the race as trivial. Meanwhile, Kanata had moved up to 18th place. just 3 spots away from qualifying for the main race. In the control room, Ogata was stunned by Kanata's aggressive driving, noting his extreme angles into corners and speeds out of them. Shun suggested that Kanata might not yet be showing his full capabilities. Finally, the Toyota 86 moved up to the 15th position. Shun told Ogata there was no need to relay further information to Kanata. He cautioned that celebration was premature. The downhill sections that could compensate for the car's lack of horsepower were over. The long straight before the finish line would be a nightmare for the Toyota 86, as faster cars he had previously overtaken could catch up. He needed to widen the lead before then. The 1.9-kilometer long straight section finally appeared, with the Toyota 86 ranked 14th. From this point, the drone with a top speed of 180 kilometers per hour was left behind, and fixed cameras took over the race coverage. At this moment, Ogata felt deeply responsible. Kanata had gained a lead through his driving skills, but was losing ground due to the insufficient power of the car provided by Ogata. The naturally aspirated 2.0 Toyota 86 could only reach a top speed of 230 kilometers per hour, while other cars could hit 300 kilometers per hour on this straight. By the end of the straight, which ended in a sharp turn, Kanata's position had dropped to 15th, with the gap to the 16th place narrowing. As the Toyota 86 crossed the finish line, Kanata finished 16th, missing 15th place by a mere 0.019 seconds, narrowly missing the finals. Ogata was self-critical, but Kanata reassured him, praising him as a superb technician and expressing satisfaction with the Toyota 86 throughout the race. As Shun was about to invite them to dinner, Ren approached and slapped Kanata, worried about his risky driving style. However, Kanata did not recognize that Ren was the race angel and was confused about what had happened. Back at MFG headquarters, it was discovered that one of the top 15 drivers had used unauthorized tires, leading to disqualification. As a result, Kanata, originally in 16th place, moved up to 15th and qualified for the main race. Fumihiro couldn't help but remark on Kanata's luck, comparing it to Takumi's. On the other side, Shun saw the announcement from MFG. Ogata was thrilled to learn that Kanata had qualified for the main race. The other competitors were mostly familiar faces from previous races. Ishigami driving a Porsche 911 GT3, Michael in a Porsche 718, Yudai with an Audi R8, Yosuke in an AMG GT, Shun driving a GTR, Daigo in a Lamborghini Huracan, Kaito with a Ferrari 458. Shun informed Kanata that the prize for the champion was 100 million yen, and the overall season leader would win 1 billion yen. Meanwhile, Ren, who was taking a bath that evening, began to regret her impulsive action earlier in the day, worried that Kanata might dislike her because of it. Due to Kanata's impressive performance in the qualifiers, many tuning shops were willing to sponsor modifications. The Toyota 86 is particularly known for its vast array of aftermarket parts. Although it was too late to upgrade for the race in a few days, substantial improvements could be made by the second event of the season to enhance the car's competitiveness. Kanata made a single request to Ogata: to disable the car's traction control system. He believed this would allow him better control of the vehicle. The next day, Ogata suggested redrafting their contract, feeling guilty about taking 50% of the winnings. However, Kanata did not agree, as he was not concerned about the prize money. During this time, Kanata met fellow racers Kakeru and Nozomi, driving a Lotus Exige and an Alfa Romeo 4C respectively. Nozomi fell in love with Kanata at first sight and was even more delighted upon discovering he was the driver of the Toyota 86. Ogata informed Kanata that they were known as the Yajikita siblings, known in MFG races for their individual skills and perfect teamwork, especially in drafting. As the main race approached, the commentator introduced the special guest for the event, Kai, a former professional driver now retired and working as a racing coach. The 15 competitors walked into the race venue. While Kanata and Shun were chatting, they overheard racer Daigo inquiring about his new car but displaying great dissatisfaction. Shun despised such wasteful behavior, noting that Daigo lacked driving skills, not car performance. Shun was determined to reach the podium because under MFG rules, any racer who made it to the podium could choose to receive a kiss from any race angel. A drone led the 15 cars at a cruising speed of 40 kilometers per hour. If any car passed the drone before its blue light was on, it would be penalized with a 15-second delay. As the last car passed through the gate, the race officially started, and all 15 beasts roared to life. Shun, driving the GTR, immediately overtook the AMG GT to claim 4th place, taking advantage of the rear-drive AMG's lack of traction with cold tires. Ishigami, driving the 911 GT3, was leading, with Michael closely behind, gradually extending the gap with the cars behind. Facing a group of performance beasts with up to 600 horsepower, Michael's 718, though less powerful, remained composed. Kai noted Michael's exceptional skill in managing tire heating, a critical ability at his level to accurately sense the surface temperature of all 4 tires. Besides Michael, only Kanata, who started from the back, might possess this skill. Starting from the back, Kanata had no chasing cars behind him, allowing him to drive the optimal racing line with ease. Meanwhile, the Alfa Romeo was battling with the Honda Type R, keeping the Toyota 86 from falling too far behind. The 15 cars gradually entered the first uphill section of the race. Yosuke, driving the AMG GTS, remained calm, believing that Shun's aggressive driving could easily lead to defeat. In his 3rd year competing, Yosuke was confident he could win the championship this year. Daigo, in 8th place driving a Lamborghini, faced difficulties because his tires had not heated up, preventing him from going full throttle. He continuously complained about MFG's rules, wishing he could use wider tires. In the studio, Kai discussed the grip-to-weight ratio rule with the commentator. The rule, which does not limit engine size but matches tire width to car weight, seemed too simplistic even for the former professional driver Kai, who struggled to understand its real purpose. This often leads to a feeling that races are just about straight-line speed and gives an advantage to high-power cars. However, Kai then suggested that this year's race marked a turning point. Michael, who joined mid-season last year, exemplifies the preference for balance over power. Kanata, competing this year, does the same, although his Toyota 86's low horsepower makes it hard to praise its overall balance. The emergence of these 2 drivers gives a chance for an upset under the current rules, challenging the dominance of high-power vehicles. The leading group is about to pass through the scenic rest area with Ishigami's GT3 in the lead, followed closely by Michael's Cayman. Shun's GTR is tightly chasing Udai in 3rd place, with Shun determined to uphold the GTR's honor. Udai, driving the Audi R8, believes that performance is everything, with his large engine and computer-controlled all-wheel drive being the ideal setup. As the vehicles leave the first timing zone and the last Toyota 86 passes the scenic rest area, all cars enter the 2nd timing zone. The track transitions from an uphill to a downhill section. Due to its lack of horsepower, Kanata's Toyota 86 is currently 6.8 seconds behind the Alfa in front. Fortunately, there's a battle ahead between the Lotus, Honda, and Alfa. Kakeru tells his sister to hurry up and overtake, but Nozomi finds it challenging, especially since the front-wheel drive Honda is tough to handle. Kakeru then intentionally leaves space on the outside at a left turn, allowing Kazuhiro in the Honda to charge forward, but quickly blocks him again. Kazuhiro has to brake sharply, and the Alfa seizes the opportunity to overtake. Before Kazuhiro can react, a red flash cleanly overtakes from the outside Kanata's Toyota 86, unnoticed by Kazuhiro, who was focused on the cars ahead. Kakeru believes they cannot outmaneuver Kanata on the curves. They must widen the gap with Kanata, deciding to do so on an upcoming uphill stretch. The leading pair of Porsches are fiercely competing, with Michael closely chasing the frontrunner Ishigami. As a 2-time MFG champion, Ishigami is in a tough spot. Michael believes Ishigami doesn't deserve to drive the GT3, the most powerful of the rear-engine Porsches, questioning how a country boy fits in such a masterpiece. In contrast, the battle for 3rd place between the GTR and Audi R8 is even more intense. Shun, driving the GTR, is not concerned about tire wear. Meanwhile, Kaido, in the Ferrari, has overtaken the BMW to move up to 9th place. After a turbo issue in the qualifiers, last year's runner-up did not perform well, but Kai believes Kaido will not settle for this position, recognizing him as an excellent driver. After passing the BMW, the Ferrari quickly caught up to the Lamborghini. Daigo commented that the turbocharged Ferrari had lost its purity. Although Kaido has no special preference for the Ferrari brand, He is annoyed by the cars in front of him. After the commentator finished announcing the current standings, all cars entered the third timing zone. At this point, the Toyota 86 is in 14th place, closely followed by the Honda Type R, with the Yajikita siblings having pulled ahead. Kazuhiro doesn't understand how an old Toyota can clock faster times than Michael in the third section. As they reach the third section, Kanata finally shows his strength. The Toyota 86's cornering speed is very high, with the Type R only managing to close the gap on the straights. However, as the straight sections become shorter, the Type R gradually falls behind the Toyota 86. The BMW in 10th place has broken down. Before the Yajikita siblings could feel relieved, they saw the Toyota 86 appear in their rearview mirror. The gap they had worked hard to create was quickly closing. To avoid losing more ground to the leading group, they decided not to use blocking tactics. They simply wouldn't let anyone overtake. After all, overtaking is difficult on such a narrow track. The leading group soon began to enter a foggy area, which limited visibility and increased the difficulty of commentary. Taking this opportunity, the commentator introduced Kanata's background. Kanata graduated from the Royal Racing School in the UK, started karting at the age of 7 in the UK Karting Championship, and won 6 major races within 2 years. At 10, he entered F4 races and secured the championship within 2 years, graduating as the top student. He showed remarkable talent both on real tracks and simulators. Before graduating, several car manufacturers offered him contracts, all of which he declined because his mother was ill at the time. The commentator also revealed a surprising fact. Kanata had a Japanese teacher at the racing school, Takumi Fujiwara. Kai was shocked by the news, as memories of racing Takumi on mountain roads twice flooded back. The commentator started detailing Takumi's career. At 20, he competed alone in the British Rally Championship. Although he had weaknesses on gravel, his performance on paved roads was exceptionally strong. In his third year, he won the championship and earned a full season entry in the WRC. However, his career was cut short due to a vehicle malfunction during preseason testing that led to an accident, resulting in a long hospital stay and rehabilitation. Kai expressed relief upon hearing that Takumi was now in good health. On the track, Kanata was conserving his tires and did not initiate an attack, especially since overtaking in this hazardous area could be dangerous, not for the overtaker, but for the one being overtaken. He did not want to startle the Alfa Romeo ahead. Meanwhile, the lead group had emerged from the fog. The Porsche 718 was closely following the 911 GT3. Ishigami believed that the rear engine layout had braking advantages over mid-engine configurations. With the heaviest part of the car at the back, the rear wheels maintained stronger traction and transmission efficiency. He felt his 911 GT3 was more sophisticated than any other car from different manufacturers. Behind him, Michael was bored, feeling that Ishigami lacked the qualities of a current competitive driver.
The king of the century.
Michael sped up through the corners to overtake Ishigami. This was not a defeat for the 911 GT3, but rather a result of Ishigami's timidity. Kai noted that Michael's move was clever. He shifted gears quickly, took the outer lane, and positioned his car alongside into the corner. Approaching the next corner, he made contact to seize space from his opponent. In regional races like the MFG, Michael is a formidable presence. The battle for 11th position emerged from the fog. Nozomi had barely reacted before the Toyota 86 swiftly passed her. Kai praised Kanata's driving skills, noting his ability to handle lateral G-forces while smoothly decelerating and maximizing the braking grip of all 4 tires. While both Michael and Kanata were trained in Europe, they are very different drivers. Michael, a product of elite scientific training, is like a precise machine, unlikely to make mistakes. Kanata, on the other hand, does not embody this mechanical perfection, and often surprises with unexpected maneuvers. Soon, the Toyota 86 accelerated to the outside to pull alongside the Lotus, which did not intend to yield its line. However, the race car was disturbed by the traction, and a moment's hesitation allowed the Toyota 86 to overtake. Kanata moved up to 11th place, a move that even Kai did not anticipate. Kakeru planned to overtake the Toyota 86 on the subsequent straight, calculating that he needed to keep the gap within 4.2 seconds. Now in second place, Ishigami watched Michael's car maintain incredible speed on such a narrow side road, thinking he could not do the same, thus gradually increasing the distance between them. The second group, 7 seconds behind the leaders, now caught up. Yudai, in his naturally aspirated 5.2-liter V10 Audi R8, faced off against Shun's 3.8-liter V6 twin-turbo GTR. On the straight, the GTR perfectly followed in the R8's slipstream, then timed its move to pull alongside and fully accelerate past the Audi R8. Meanwhile, after pulling away, Kanata intentionally eased off the throttle. The third group featured a naturally aspirated 5.2-liter V10 Lamborghini Huracan racing against a 3.9-liter V8 twin-turbo Ferrari 488. Kaido skillfully seized the moment to overtake. The Yajikita siblings approached a long straight 3.2 seconds behind the Toyota 86. This straight posed the greatest challenge for the Toyota 86. Using slipstream tactics, the siblings gradually overtook Kanata, who also slipped into their draft. Kakeru, observing Kanata's timing and distance for entering the slipstream, recognized his expertise. With the Toyota 86 tucked behind two cars, its air resistance was significantly reduced, allowing it to reach new top speeds in 6th gear. Ogata knew why Kanata had previously eased off the throttle. He was strategizing, having already calculated the Yajikita siblings' slipstream into his plan. As Michael and Ishigami's Porsches crossed the start line, the race officially entered the second lap. Kai noted that the drivers were managing their tire wear. In the second lap, the cars would unleash all their horsepower for a sprint. Kaido had already caught up to Jackson's Carrera GTS. For the Ferrari, overtaking was just a matter of time. On a straight, Kaido accelerated past the Carrera GTS, leaving Jackson helpless. Jackson believed only 3 drivers in the MFG were truly exceptional. Michael was first, Kaido second, and the third, who didn't race this time, was last year's Alpine A110 driver, Sawatari, who missed the race to celebrate his girlfriend's birthday. Back to the race, the first section was Ishigami's only chance to retake the lead. The GT3's Heart, a horizontally opposed 6-cylinder engine reaching 9,000 RPM and 500 horsepower, was unmatched in the MFG. Yet Ishigami still couldn't find any flaws in Michael's driving. Ogata was worried whether Kanata's speed might be too much for his tires, but Kanata had already calculated the tire wear for this race. He aimed to finish higher than his current position as a gift to Ogata. Meanwhile, Ishigami's pursuit of Michael ended in failure, with Michael leading through the first section. 3rd place GTR, 4th place Audi R8, 5th place AMG GTS, and 6th place Ferrari 488, which had just begun its attack. Kaido had caught up to the number 6 car, a BMW M6. The Ferrari accelerated to the inside line and aggressively overtook in the curve, moving into 6th place. The Carrera GTS driven by Jackson was 8th, Daigo's Lamborghini was 9th. The Yajikita siblings had just passed the mountaintop. The Toyota 86, about 6 seconds slower, was struggling uphill, gradually being left behind by the lead group. The last was the Honda Type R. The drivers completed the first section and re-entered the challenging second section. At this point, the Toyota 86 suddenly accelerated, closing in on the Yajikita siblings ahead. Michael took a solo lead, leaving Ishigami behind. Meanwhile, an unexpected change occurred in the third group. The fast-moving GTR slowed down, allowing the Audi R8 to catch up again. Having pushed too hard initially, the GTR's front tires now showed signs of understeering. Kaido, driving the Ferrari 488, was speeding along and aimed to overtake the AMG GTS next. Returning to the battle between the Yajikita siblings and the 86, Kai analyzed that due to the significant gap between the Toyota 86 and others, Kakeru and Nozomi, being pursued, would feel frustrated. On the other hand, Daigo was closely following the Carrera GTS. Unwilling to stay behind a Porsche, he planned to make his move on the highest points short straight, ready to showcase the power of his 5.2-liter V10 engine. Meanwhile, the Toyota 86 continued to closely follow the Yajikita siblings. The second section's uphill gradient was very steep. The leading 718, despite having only a 2.5-liter 4-cylinder boxer engine, had left the supercars far behind thanks to Michael's brilliant driving. Ishigami, in second place, had virtually given up chasing and was focused on maintaining his position. Behind him, Shun and Yudai, both with all-wheel drive systems, one with a mid-engine and the other with a front engine, continued to compete. The GTR maintained its frightening acceleration out of corners, holding firm to its position. Behind them, the Ferrari overtook another car, moving up to 5th place. Catching the group ahead was only a matter of time. Takuya's BMW M6 was in 7th, followed by Jackson's Carrera GTS in 8th, and Daigo's Lamborghini in 9th. Coming onto the straight, Daigo was also preparing to overtake, especially since the Ferrari was just ahead. The Lamborghini was eager to catch up with its destined rival. Entering the terrifying 3rd section, tire wear became extremely critical. On the downhill with hundreds of meters in elevation change, a moment's lapse could be fatal. However, Kanata showed no fear of this challenge.
Let's go.
The GTR and R8 in the second group failed to pick up the pace, allowing Kaito's Ferrari to catch up. Yudai, caught in the middle, felt immense pressure and decided to adjust his strategy to block the pursuing Ferrari. Currently, all the cars on the track maintained their stable rhythms, except for the Toyota 86, which was rapidly closing in on the cars ahead. At that moment, the headquarters computer highlighted the Toyota 86 with a prominent indicator, a first for any driver in the race. Kanata was speeding down the downhill curves at an astonishing rate. Within just 2 bends, he had caught up to the Yajikita siblings. Kakeru, puzzled by how quickly Kanata had closed the gap similar to the first lap, realized that if overtaken before entering the foggy area, it would be game over. He prepared to block the Toyota 86's path. In a moment of distraction, the Toyota 86 overtook Nozomi's Alpha. However, being boxed in by the Yajikita siblings, the system's prominent indicator disappeared. With the Lotus blocking the front and the Alpha pressing from behind, Kanata had to admire Kakeru's excellent defense. He realized that if he conserved his tires too much, he wouldn't be able to break through their defense. Kanata recalled what his teacher Takumi once said: "No matter how narrow the road appears, as long as there is enough space for 3 cars to run side by side, there is definitely a way to overtake."
Just because of you.
The sudden sideways move by the Toyota 86 as it overtook left Nozomi stunned. Kakeru couldn't understand how his Lotus, with its superior steering capability, was overtaken by the Toyota 86. Kai marveled at Kanata's tire management skills, which seemed almost magical. Despite the Toyota 86's lower horsepower, which was expected to cause more tire wear compared to other cars, Kanata managed it exceptionally well. The scene switched back to the third group. After entering a foggy area, the pace of the 3 cars slowed down. Even the Ferrari had to behave, as the fog and the absence of long straights, combined with the larger sizes of the 3 cars, left no room for overtaking. After passing the Yajikita siblings, Kanata quickly caught up to the taillights of the cars ahead. Emil's Lexus LC500 appeared in front of Kanata for the first time. Overtaking it would bring Kanata into the top 10. The red race car disappeared into the dense fog. Kanata asked Ogata to report the time difference to the car ahead every second. Although Kanata could mentally simulate the track, he couldn't see the cars ahead, hence needed Ogata to constantly update him on the time gap. Emil was initially 2.6 seconds ahead of Kanata. After 1 bend, the gap reduced to 2 seconds. Just as Ogata reported a remaining gap of 1 second, the silhouette of the Lexus emerged through the fog in front of the Toyota 86. Kanata didn't hesitate and immediately accelerated to pull alongside the Lexus. The drone footage captured the moment the Lexus's taillights emerged from the fog, and the Toyota 86 overtook in the gap. At that time, Kanata was only 3.5 seconds behind the Carrera GTS. Ogata finally understood why Kanata had him report the time differences. Kanata had planned to overtake as soon as the car ahead appeared from the fog. The communications team informed Jackson that the Toyota 86 was catching up to him at an astonishing speed. Now, Kanata was just 1 second behind the Carrera GTS and ready to use the same tactic again. In such dense fog, the 2 cars drove side by side, seemingly disregarding their own safety. Ultimately, Jackson backed down, allowing the Toyota 86 to overtake and move into 9th place. Kai was left speechless by such a daring overtaking maneuver. Meanwhile, a mysterious man praised Kanata for perfectly replicating his demonstration run during the qualifying race. In the main race, Kanata even added his own style to this foundation. 20 years later, Keisuke Takahashi had become a real estate tycoon. His former race car, the Mazda RX-7, still featured in the official tutorial videos for MFG races. Now, Kanata was driving the Toyota 86, mimicking Keisuke's racing style on the track. Fans have always hotly debated Keisuke's official tutorial videos. It's remarkable that such records were set by an old car with a 5-speed manual transmission. This record stood until last year, when Michael broke it during the final race to secure pole position. Keisuke sharply pointed out that Kanata had a serious flaw, which just hadn't been exposed yet. On the track, Michael's 718 is far ahead. Ishigami's GT3, also driving a Porsche, is a full 13 seconds behind in second place, having been soundly beaten in the competition. In the third group, Shun's GTR is still stubbornly holding on to third place. Determined to keep his position for the Angel's Kiss of car number 7, he vows to defend his current spot. As they approach a fork in the road, drivers typically choose the left for an advantage. However, Kaito's Ferrari unexpectedly takes the right side. When the paths merge again, the Ferrari squeezes past the Audi R8. Ultimately, Yudai yields, letting Kaito overtake him. The scene shifts to the 7th group, featuring the Lamborghini and BMW M6. The Toyota 86 now has these two cars in sight, but due to a power disparity, it's gradually falling behind. Aware of the significant power difference, Kanata decides to focus on maintaining his current position. The Carrera GTS trailing the Toyota 86 is only 4.7 seconds behind. Jackson decides to make his move on a straight section of the track. The third group bursts onto a long straight. The most powerful Ferrari moves first, pulling out of the slipstream to line up alongside the GTR. Yudai thinks it's too early to make a move. Meanwhile, Shun, feeling compelled, tucks in behind the Ferrari's slipstream. All three cars are now speeding at over 300 kilometers per hour. The braking point is quickly approaching, and they prepare to brake hard. Shun mismanaged his tires and failed to brake in time. His hopes for the Angel's Kiss were shattered. In a frantic attempt to return to the track, the GTR was overtaken by the AMG GTS. Meanwhile, Michael crossed the finish line with ease, securing the championship. Ishigami finished second, Kaito third, Yudai fourth, Yosuke fifth, and Shun sixth. On the track, the Lamborghini had already passed the BMW M6. Further back, there was a fierce battle for ninth place. The Carrera GTS relentlessly pursued the Toyota 86. With a significant speed advantage, the Porsche Carrera GTS didn't need the Toyota's slipstream. As it overtook, the Toyota followed in the Porsche's slipstream in an extreme maneuver, but the Porsche quickly increased its speed and pulled away. They were approaching the braking point. Kanata still delayed braking, entering the curve ahead of his opponent. Kanata, relying on his superb skills, successfully overtook the Porsche on the inside, reclaiming ninth place. The overtaken Jackson realized that it wasn't the Porsche's brakes that lost, but rather his tires, which were prematurely worn out during the sprint. In contrast, the Toyota 86 still had enough tire tread left for competitive braking. If Kanata had been driving a more competitive car, the MFG race would have been even more interesting. The opening race officially concluded. Ishigami, the runner-up, and Kaito, the third-place finisher, stepped onto the podium to celebrate. Ogata was thrilled. The prize for ninth place was 8 million yen, and half of that, 4 million yen, was his share, surpassing his repair shop's annual revenue. Michael, who never took the MFG seriously, did not attend the award ceremony. Ishigami always chose the same race queen for his ceremonies, while Kaito changed his race queen each time. Fortunately, they did not select race queen Ren, relieving Shun. Jackson approached Kanata to shake his hand and pay his respects, praising him as an excellent driver. Seeing this, Nozomi also approached Kanata, offering a hug for his outstanding performance in the race. Although Kanata declined, Nozomi hugged him anyway. Ren witnessed this scene firsthand. The next race is the Lake Ashinoko GT, followed by the Peninsula Manazuru, the fourth at Seaside Double Lane, and the final battle at Atami Ghost. The wealthy owners of the Ferraris and Lamborghinis had their cars transported on trailers, but Ogata had to drive his car back himself. At Ogata's workshop, Shun introduced the engineer responsible for the upcoming modifications. The engineer immediately detailed his Phase 1 upgrade plan, focusing on the braking and drivetrain systems. He planned to modify only the intake and exhaust systems initially, leaving engine modifications for Phase 2, as simply increasing power does not enhance competitiveness and could disrupt the balance, affecting Kanata's driving. Kanata fully agreed with this approach, noting that his mentor, Takumi, had advised against pursuing high-powered cars and suggested that using a car with less power than the competitors might be advantageous. Ogata mentioned that even with a turbocharger boosting the engine to 280 horsepower, it would still be less powerful than the competitors, thus not contradicting Takumi's advice. However, Kanata insisted on keeping the original power unit, as his aim was to challenge himself, not caring about rankings. He felt that if Takumi were present, he would say that the Toyota 86's full potential had not yet been realized. The engineer laughed upon hearing this, noting that it sounded like something Takumi would say. Kanata was surprised to learn that the engineer also knew of Takumi, a well-known figure among drivers of his generation. Shun, learning from Ogata that the Toyota 86's engine wasn't modified, was astonished. The second race, unlike the opener, had no hills and consisted entirely of flat surfaces. When he learned that this was per the engineer's advice, he chose to remain silent, recognizing the engineer's significant expertise, especially in suspension tuning. Shun's GTR had also been modified by him. The next day, Ren and a friend went shopping and stopped at a coffee shop to rest. There, they were surprised to find Kanata working. Despite having won many MFG prizes, Kanata did not view racing as a means to earn money. Rather, he saw work as a way to experience life. Meanwhile, the Toyota 86 was undergoing a parts upgrade. The first change was the shock absorbers. Since MFG races are on public roads, race-specific shocks are unsuitable. More flexible shocks enhance tire grip after pushing the limits. Regarding the brakes, after one race, the original brake discs were slightly warped and the cooling performance could no longer keep up with Kanata's driving skills. Consequently, the car was fitted with Blitz 6-piston calipers, ensuring that even under continuous heavy braking, there would be no issues. For Kanata, this would be a powerful asset in the final stages of a race, potentially making the car unexpectedly fast. Next came the modifications to the intake and exhaust systems. It was essential that the intake and exhaust be modified as a set, including the throttle body. This would significantly enhance throttle response, a crucial advantage for a driver like Kanata, who excels in throttle control at the limit. The engineer believed that Kanata, a protege of the genius Takumi, could undoubtedly surpass other gifted drivers. A few days later, Kanata tested the upgraded Toyota 86. Ogata's expression alone hinted at the success of the upgrades. At the summit now, there is a blue Alpine A110, next to which stands Sawatari, the driver who missed the qualifying race. Ogata, stunned by Kanata's driving skills, finally realized what professional driving is like. Who drives without braking? He wondered. Kanata explained that he never uses brakes when ascending and cornering, allowing the car to naturally slow down. This is a basic technique for driving low-powered race cars. Kanata looked towards the nearby Lake Ashinoko track, puzzled about why they couldn't run on it now. Ogata explained helplessly that the road was under regular traffic regulation, and unless it was the official qualifying race, no one could run there. Official test drives for race vehicles could only take place on this road, giving experienced racers a significant advantage. Consequently, Kanata prepared to test the downhill performance of the Toyota 86. Just as Kanata left, Ogata noticed that the Alpine A110 had followed him. While testing the race car's performance, Kanata marveled at the engineer's modification skills. Despite no enhancement to the power unit, the car felt more explosive than before, and its grip had significantly improved. The most noticeable improvement was the brakes, which felt almost like those of a supercar. This allowed him to race freely on the track. As Kanata reveled in the significant changes to the Toyota 86, the Alpine A110 passed him on a curve. Kanata, absorbed in the joy of his car's evolution, had neglected his rearview mirror, leading to this oversight. Still, the skill of the other driver made Kanata express admiration. Unexpectedly, Sawatari and Kanata had a history. During Sawatari's 3 years studying in France, they had competed against each other multiple times. Back then, Kanata was becoming well known. Although Sawatari considered him a major rival, financial difficulties and a lack of a good race car led to his defeat. Times have changed, and now it was Kanata's turn to drive a less competitive car. Sawatari was determined to settle this old rivalry in the MFG race. Following the MFG official announcement of the qualifying race schedule, Kanata was assigned to compete on the 6th day. Ogata explained that qualifying races are generally grouped randomly based on current rankings. However, to ensure fairness, the top 7 racers are evenly distributed over 7 days. Michael, ranked first, would compete on the final day, second-ranked Ishigami on the 6th day, third-ranked Kato on the 5th day, and 9th-ranked Kanata also on the 6th day. Ogata believed that competing later was advantageous, as it allowed racers to adjust their pace based on the performances of their competitors. By June, the Lake Ashinoko GT welcomed its first day of qualifying. The Lake Ashinoko track is 25.3 kilometers long, with 1 lap for qualifying and 3 laps for the main race. Daigo, driving a Lamborghini Huracan, found the first day challenging. Amid the roar of the V10 naturally aspirated engine, the Lamborghini sped off. Although Daigo's skills were passable, the superior performance of the Italian supercar made him stand out in the race. Simultaneously, Kanata, working at a coffee shop, attracted the attention of a group of middle-aged women. The manager noted that Kanata, a foreigner, had unexpectedly beautiful Japanese handwriting. In reality, Kanata, who could not write Japanese, simply relied on his memory to copy the script. Back at the Lake Ashinoko racetrack, Kazuhiro was competing in a modified Honda NSX. In the previous race, he had driven a Honda Type R. The rules allow for changing vehicles within the same brand during the same season. This car had been converted to a purely gasoline-powered, lightweight mid-rear drive vehicle after removing 3 electric motors and the energy recovery system. Kazuhiro had spent 2 years modifying it and was eagerly awaiting this moment. Inside the car, he could barely contain his excitement. With its excellent performance, the car temporarily took the lead over the Lamborghini on the first day. On the second day of the race, Nozomi drove an Alfa Romeo 4C. Although she was the only female driver, her results were consistently impressive. Sawatari and Shun also competed today. Shun couldn't resist criticizing Sawatari's peculiar views on relationships. All of Sawatari's girlfriends were 17 years old, and he would break up with them as soon as they turned 18. Despite this, Shun highly respected Sawatari's skills, particularly on the technically demanding Lake Ashinoko track, where Sawatari's potential was unmatched by anyone except perhaps Michael. However, Sawatari always lacked a desire for victory. If something could trigger his true capabilities, he would become a formidable opponent. Thinking of Sawatari and Kanata as 2 formidable newcomers, Shun vowed to step up his own game. Meanwhile, the Toyota 86 was undergoing final 4-wheel alignment adjustments. Ogata was amazed by the 3D-wheel alignment machine, all part of ensuring the suspension performed at its best. Back at the racetrack, the Alpine A110 Speed was astonishing. It took the lead with the fastest time into the second section, and even set a new record for the first section. This was a rare display of effort from Sawatari, who is often regarded as highly talented but criticized for his lack of aggression in races. Now, spurred by Kanata's presence, this sleeping genius was awakening. From the second to the third section, Sawatari continued to break track records. He reached the track's only straightaway, where full throttle was possible. Just before the finish line, there was a final climb, where the turbo engine's power significantly benefited the lightweight car. With the turbo and lightweight body, combined with driving skills comparable to Michael and Kanata, Sawatari successfully set a new track record at Lake Ashinoko. Following closely behind him was Shun in his GTR. The fully upgraded Toyota 86 went full throttle and reached 13th place at the first checkpoint. A surprising achievement considering the car had no power upgrades, and the first section was a gentle uphill. This astonishing ranking shocked Shun and Ogata in the control room. Even more impressive was the system's prominent recognition of the driver's skill, which for Kanata was simply expected. The night before the race, he had practiced with simulation driving in his room, watching Keisuke's race videos in his mind. This unique impression training technique of Kanata even surpassing the latest driving simulators, is a testament to his inherited ability. Both Kanata and his mother can retain images in their brains, a talent his mother applied in her painting. Due to her poor health, Kanata was encouraged to engage in sports from a young age. In contrast, other drivers who had already competed did not display the same composure. Influenced by Sawatari, Shun repeatedly made mistakes in his GTR, resulting in poor performance. Neither Kakeru's Lotus, Emil's Lexus LC500, Udai's Audi R8, Jackson's 911 GTS, nor Yosuke, who switched from an AMG GTS to an AMG GTR, could challenge Sawatari's results. Only Kaido, driving a Ferrari, performed exceptionally well, yet he still ended up second, unable to threaten Sawatari's pole position. Lake Ashinoko, one of the most challenging tracks in the MFG, showcased the extraordinary competitiveness of the Toyota 86, upgraded only in suspension and brakes. Finally, the race entered the death zone, an area covered with volcanic ash from Mount Fuji, where 5 accidents had occurred the previous day. Here, Kanata started performing Takumi's classic drift, marking the end of the first season of MFG. In a feared section, known as the Death Zone, a Toyota 86 stunned everyone with its drifting, despite having only 200 horsepower, the lowest among all competitors. However, its cornering speed was astonishing, thanks to the zero countersteer inertia drift technique learned from Takumi Fujiwara. Indeed, the second season of MF Ghost has arrived, and Kanata continues to compete in the Ashinoko GT Race. Driving the Toyota 86, Kanata entered the death zone, a stretch covered with volcanic ash from a nearby crater, making the road extremely slippery. Ogata in the communications room warned Kanata, who responded by adjusting his driving style, confusing both Shun and Ogata. The 86 boldly adopted a drifting style to tackle the ash-covered track. Shun urgently questioned if the car's traction control system was broken, but to his shock, the anti-slip system had already been completely removed at Kanata's request. This unexpected drifting technique was officially recognized, a first in the death zone and a definitive acknowledgement of the driver's skill. Shun in the communications room wondered if drifting really was faster, but the officials soon provided an answer. The Toyota 86 moved up to 10th place in lap times, overtaking several drivers in this section alone. As Kanata felt the tires regain traction, the death zone was almost over, followed by a series of downhill segments, pushing the naturally aspirated engine car to 9th place. A remarkable achievement. The 86 rhythmically navigated through the wooded track sections. Engineer Okuyama, who modified Kanata's car, was confident in the race car he personally tuned, especially its suspension tailored to Kanata's driving style and track characteristics. The 86 sped from the second to the third section, utilizing the continuous downhill to boost Kanata's rank to 7th. Kanata received more system recognition than Sawatari, who set a new track record because the system evaluates driving skill, whereas the race tests overall capability of driver and car. Finally, the 86 reached the longest straight on the track, followed by a 2-kilometer uphill stretch to the finish line. This segment posed the greatest challenge for the underpowered 86. Kanata struggled up the hill in the Toyota 86, dropping to 8th place, but managed to maintain that position and finish the preliminaries in 8th, a result that surprised everyone. Post-race, Shun asked Kanata where he learned to drift. Kanata mentioned he learned from a teacher at school, noting his own drifting was elementary compared to his teacher's. Although drifting wasn't part of the formal curriculum at racing school, the teacher would take Kanata to rally tracks after hours to practice weight transfer techniques with soft suspension cars on low-friction surfaces. Kanata, whose father had left his family, considered Takumi as another father figure. On the track, Ishigami began the ranking race driving a Porsche 911 GT3. Although not the strongest in skill, he relied on the top car and his racing experience, believing he could secure pole position. On the final day of the ranking race, Michael, known as the strongest driver in MFG events, took the stage last. His Porsche 718 Cayman swiftly navigated through the death zone. While Kanata became a topic of discussion, by drifting through this section, Michael believed the well-tuned chassis of the Porsche allowed him to easily handle the track, aligning with his calm style. Michael consistently kept a 0.2-second gap behind Sawatari. This was intentional. He let Sawatari's Alpine A110 lead, planning to push hard on the final uphill stretch. Despite this strategy, his lap time was hard to beat, a rule Michael set for himself. The battle for pole position turned into a Porsche versus Alpine showdown. Sawatari, on the other side, recognized Michael's strategy but didn't view him as a significant threat. Instead, he found Kanata, who achieved 8th place with a 2-liter NA engine and an old-style 3-pedal setup. More formidable. The Porsche 718 was marked by the system in the final section, and the gap between Michael and Sawatari's lap times narrowed. With the powerful Porsche, Michael successfully overtook Sawatari's Alpine on the straightaway. The Ashinoko preliminaries concluded with Michael securing pole position and Sawatari taking second, both setting new track records. Ishigami finished 3rd, Shun 13th, and due to improvements from other drivers, Kanata's ranking fell to 10th. On the eve of the Ashinoko main race, staff reported the qualifying results to Fumihiro. Michael and Sawatari significantly broke the Ashinoko track records, leading Fumihiro to remark that someone might finally challenge Ryosuke. The weather forecast for the final day predicted a high chance of rain. Concerned about the rainy conditions, Ogata worried about Kanata's race the next day, given the inherent disadvantages of FR compared to 4-wheel drive, and MSR Ogata called Okuyama to inquire about the wet weather tuning plan. Despite the rain, the Ashinoko GT went ahead as scheduled, with the event inviting Mr. Ryuji, the organizer from Zero Academy, who had once lost to Ryosuke in a race. Shun is actually a graduate of Zero Academy. Even after tuning the Toyota 86, Ogata remained concerned about the race, but Kanata was unfazed, noting the rain would provide a unique spectacle for the audience. Drivers hurried to their cars with just 5 minutes until the race start. The rainy road race was full of rapid changes, emphasizing endurance. Reduced visibility and grip due to rain, coupled with battling opponents, made calm judgment crucial for drivers. 15 cars drove off the start line, and as drones lit up blue lights, the vehicles surged forward like beasts. Vehicles with 4-wheel drive quickly overtook those ahead, proving advantageous under the conditions set by Ryosuke. With the changing rankings, the race girls began updating the name tags. Currently, Michael is leading with Sawatari close behind. Sawatari believes that in the rain, horsepower cannot be fully utilized, which truly tests a driver's skill. Michael remains calm, confident in his handling of wet roads. Kazuhiro, driving a Honda NSX, follows behind a Ferrari and a Lamborghini. Despite competing against 2 of the most luxurious Italian supercars, he aims to demonstrate Honda's capabilities. The rainy death zone becomes the most challenging part of the track. Although the rain prevents volcanic ash from scattering, the wet ash turns the track extremely slippery. As the leading group enters the death zone, Daigo's Lamborghini suffers from understeer and drifts off course, allowing the Honda NSX to overtake. Kazuhiro criticizes Daigo's rough steering, noting that 4-wheel drive cars have no advantage in corners. Meanwhile, a BMW M6 closely follows Kanata's Toyota 86. Takuya notices that the 86 is not using the drifting technique seen in the qualifying race. Given the slippery conditions, he can only observe the superstar's driving style from behind. Nozomi, driving an Alfa Romeo 4C, struggles with the car's light body sliding continuously, yet she finds the challenge exhilarating. After entering the death zone, Michael and Sawatari began to pull away from other vehicles, splitting the field into several groups. Ryuji expressed keen interest in the performance of the Toyota 86 in the mid-pack, especially after entering the death zone, as it was the only car that remained completely composed. Kanata used drifting to navigate this area in the qualifying race, but now he adopted the same driving style as others. As cars entered a steep downhill section, even a minor mistake could be fatal. Yosuke, driving a Mercedes AMG GTR, was frustrated because the car's stability control system kept intervening, allowing a lesser Toyota to catch up. He stubbornly defended the inside line to prevent Kanata from passing. As the Toyota 86 passed the AMG GTR on the outside, Kanata moved up to 9th place. Race girl Marie began updating the placards, and like her, several other voluptuous girls were chosen, reportedly to cater to Fumihiro's unique preferences. This revelation caused Fumihiro at headquarters to be extremely embarrassed, even contemplating firing him. On the track, The Porsche and Alpine battling for first place officially entered the second section after passing the lake area. 6 seconds behind them were Ishigami, Kaito, Kazuhiro, and Daigo. Ryuji noted that Kazuhiro's Honda NSX performed very steadily in the rain, even against Italian and German supercars. Following them were Yudai and Jackson, and surprisingly, Kanata's 8.6 also reached this position. Ryuji recognized the exceptional nature of the 8.6 at a glance, suggesting the car must be well-tuned for wet conditions. It turns out that engineer Okuyama and Ryuji both came from the Zero team. Behind this group were Yosuke and Takuya, with Shun having caught up to them. Not far behind was Nozomi running alone, followed by Kakeru and Takamitsu at the rear. All cars had progressively entered the second section by this point. Kakeru's Lotus was struggling because its suspension was set too stiff, making it difficult to fully accelerate in the rain. However, his sister Nozomi preferred a softer suspension, which made her drive smoother under such conditions. The leading duo, Michael and Sawatari, passed the hairpin turn. Although their cars were not outstanding in performance, they continued to extend their lead over the following teams. Due to an underperformance in the preliminaries, Shun, as a student of Zero Academy, did not want to disappoint Mr. Ryuji. He was determined to overtake Takuya's BMW M6 ahead. Shun thought that under dry conditions, Takuya's skillful cornering would be challenging. However, with the current wet conditions limiting bold moves, Shun was confident he could pass on any sufficiently long straight. After successfully overtaking the BMW M6, Ryuji analyzed that the rear-wheel drive M6 had to choose a wider turning radius to minimize lateral G-forces when exiting corners. In contrast, Shun's choice of a tighter radius allowed his car to navigate turns faster, maximizing the traction advantage of his four-wheel drive. The camera then shifted to the Toyota 8.6. At this point, Kanata had caught up with Jackson's Carrera GTS. Despite the rain, Kanata marveled at the strong grip of the rear-engine Porsche, but knew he had to make his move early. The 8.6 decisively moved to the outside, aggressively blocking the Porsche's line through the turn. Jackson, left with no choice, eased off the throttle to let Kanata pass. The overtaking maneuver by the 8.6 astounded Yosuke following behind. Even being only 2 to 3 kilometers per hour faster in the corners was enough to make the pass. Dominating the optimal racing line, the Toyota 8.6 moved up to 8th place. Ryuji analyzed that Michael, Sawatari, and Kanata all demonstrated superior performance in the rain compared to other drivers. Additionally, all three chose cars with less horsepower and were trained in European racing techniques. Michael is a native German, Sawatari had studied in France, and Kanata grew up in the UK. The UK's variable weather and the outdated drainage at Donington Park make it particularly challenging to race there in the rain. Despite his youth, Kanata's skills far surpass his contemporaries in Japan, likely for similar reasons as the other two. On another note, the Yajikita siblings faced issues due to a setup error in the brothers' car, preventing them from working together as planned. Nozomi decided to tackle the BMW M6 ahead on her own. The leading group entered the high-speed section, with 2 mid-engine cars still fiercely competing. Sawatari thought Michael was too cautious, only aiming to race in the safest way possible in the rain. Sawatari's strategy was to analyze in the first lap and make his move in the second lap, planning to show Michael the taste of being overtaken aggressively. The second group moved from the second to the third section. A red Toyota 8.6 caught up to Yudai's rear, appearing like a ghost in his rearview mirror. Yudai couldn't understand how an old Toyota could keep up with his Audi R8. Yudai, pressured by the approaching 8.6, had to speed up to catch the group ahead. This action expanded the second group into a large battle involving 6 cars. Ryuji noted that the third section is a high-speed area, where not only driving skills are tested, but also the performance of each car's electronic systems. Even at this level, drivers rely on electronics, as the entire track is 25 kilometers long, and using electronic aids can lessen the driver's burden. Modern electronics are very advanced and ideally, they would not intervene, as these systems constrain the tires and brakes. However, turning off all electronic aids in the rain would be like committing suicide. What they didn't know was that Kanata's Toyota 8.6 had already had all these systems removed. The leading group reached a long straight section where Sawatari continuously pressured Michael. It's important to note that the rear view is often obscured by spray from the car ahead as they turned and ascended the uphill section. The second group also entered the long straight, with 6 cars facing the fear of limited visibility. Although Daigo couldn't see the road ahead, he believed his Lamborghini was faster than Kazuhiro's Honda NSX at top speeds, yet he did not overtake before entering the curve. The 6 cars of the second group rushed towards the uphill section leading to the finish, and as expected, the less powerful Toyota 86 gradually fell behind the main group. The third group also reached the long straight, featuring a duel between 2 GTRs. The Nissan GTR eventually overtook the AMG GTR. Unlike Daigo's unsuccessful overtaking attempt, the scenario was different for the Nissan GTR. Although both the Lamborghini Huracan and the Nissan GTR are all-wheel drive, the defending AMG GTR with its front-engine setup had less traction compared to the mid-engine Honda NSX. At this moment, Shun was eager to overtake Jackson as Kanata was further ahead, and he was keen to challenge the talented driver. The leading group left the high-speed section and sped towards the starting point of the track. The second group, significantly behind, gradually reached the same area. Surprisingly, the Toyota 86 was not far behind. This was partly because the supercars dared not go full throttle in the rain, and partly because mutual restraint among drivers slowed the overall pace. Ryuji analyzed that the power limit for production streetcars on a closed track is 400 horsepower, and on public roads, it drops to 300 to 350 horsepower. However, almost all participants in the current race had high-powered cars, indicating a misunderstanding of the rules. The MFG season does not require such high horsepower. Meanwhile, the Porsche 718 and Alpine A110 passed the starting point to begin the second lap. Ryuji mentioned that the grip-to-weight ratio rule has several confusing traps, but the specifics are for drivers to discern. On wet roads like today, the drivable power limit drops to about 200 to 250 horsepower, which means the 2-liter Toyota 86's maximum power is just right for these conditions. The rain neutralized the power disadvantage of the 86, as the subsequent groups alternated through the start. This was a necessary strategy to avoid having their vision obscured by spray. 1/3 of the race had passed, and only those with excellent skills could stand out in these conditions, as the deadly part of the track awaited them ahead. Sawatari decided to make his move in the death zone, a section feared by all drivers. He was determined to surpass the formidable Michael. At this moment, Sawatari's 17-year-old girlfriend was anxiously watching her boyfriend compete. Ryuji was quite impressed with Sawatari's courage for the 3 car body collisions during the overtaking maneuver. Unexpectedly, Sawatari chose to make his move in the death zone. In fact, Michael made no mistakes. His line was perfect. However, Sawatari aggressively took the inside line. The first collision caused the cars to shift, and Ryuji believed that the subsequent 2 collisions stemmed more from a clash of pride between the 2 drivers. Despite hitting the guardrail, Sawatari's Alpine continued at full throttle and completed the overtaking. Both the overtaker and the overtaken performed impressively, making it one of the most spectacular overtakes in MFG history. This incident angered Michael, leading him to switch to serious mode. Michael's sister said she had never seen him like this before. Although Michael is extremely self-centered, his sister felt that he would not lose in a race. The race continued intensely. Leading the second group were the Porsche GT3 and Ferrari 488, with the Audi R8 and Toyota 86 trailing towards the death zone. As the Audi braked, Kanata made his move, accelerating to the outside of the Audi R8. With the 86 holding the advantageous line, Yudai couldn't accelerate, but he thought the 86 had overshot. At that speed, he believed it couldn't make the turn. Ryuji noted that the overtaking point was at the junction of an uphill and downhill section. While racers have strong tolerance for lateral g-forces, they struggle with the changes in vertical g-forces. This can cause a momentary loss of balance, which revealed a slight vulnerability in Yudai as he entered the turn. Perhaps Kanata had targeted this point from the start. Keisuke, watching the race, acknowledged Kanata's skill, but noted that as a student of Takumi, this was still not enough. At this moment, Daigo, driving a Lamborghini Huracan, noticed that the Audi R8 behind him had been replaced by the Toyota 86, but he could no longer respond. He was already overwhelmed managing the slippery death zone. Even with the stability control system continuously intervening, the front and rear wheels kept slipping. Just then, the Lamborghini's front wheels lost traction, causing the car to slide outward. The Toyota 86 seized the opportunity to overtake. The retirement of the Lamborghini caused all cars ranked 6th and below to move up one position. Consequently, the race queens began to get up and change the position boards. Positioned in 12th, Nozomi was eager to overtake the BMW M6 and AMG GTR ahead without her brother's cooperation. Takuya complained that Yosuke's pace was too slow, which allowed the Alfa Romeo to catch up. He kept flashing his lights, urging Yosuke to go faster, but Yosuke was already at his limit in these weather conditions. Although Nozomi couldn't drift like Kanata, she used the spray to conceal her position, feigning a move on the outside while actually striking on the inside. The Alfa and BMW M6 were side by side in the curve. Takuya was confident in his cornering speed, but recognized that the carbon fiber-bodied Alfa had better traction. Nozomi took advantage of this and successfully passed the BMW M6. In contrast, her brother Kakeru was still struggling to control his car. The moment he pressed the accelerator, the car began to slip, but fortunately, he managed to stabilize it by pressing the clutch. Nozomi saw all this and consequently teased her brother. The lead group's Alpine A110 and Porsche 718 began entering the second section just as the rain intensified, causing substantial spray. Sawatari, leading the race, thoroughly enjoyed the clear view ahead. Behind him, Michael remained calm, seemingly unaffected by the spray. Behind them, Ishigami's Porsche GT3 and Kaito's Ferrari 488 were in close competition, with the Ferrari constantly pressuring the GT3. Ishigami was confident in the GT3's superior traction and was determined not to let the Ferrari overtake easily. Moreover, when the MFG rules were first made public, he chose the GT3 as his race car, believing that the rules had loopholes. The regulations placed restrictions on mid-engine vehicles, but these did not affect his rear-engine Porsche. Due to Dago's Lamborghini dropping out, the second group now consisted of 5 cars, but the intense battle continued. Ryuji analyzed that the heavy rain had caused Ishigami's GT3 to fall further behind the lead group, slowing down the pace of the second group. Kaito blamed the situation on Ishigami driving too slowly, blocking the progress of the cars behind him. He also saw through Ishigami's calculations, believing Ishigami was arrogant. He thought Ishigami assumed that the rear-engine Porsche, which had its inherent rear-wheel drive disadvantages sealed and improved for street cars, would perform differently in a race. However, on a wet and slippery road, the basic characteristics of the car wouldn't change. The reason rear-wheel drive configurations weren't restricted in the rules is because they inherently have certain issues. In frustration, Kaito rammed the GT3 with his car's front. Kazuhiro, behind them, was terrified as he was in a similar situation, being tightly pursued by the Toyota 86. The first 2 cars of the second group began a tense struggle on the continuous blind curves of the forest area of the track, with vehicles accelerating and intensifying the race. This was a deadly duel between 2 renowned European brands, Porsche versus Ferrari. Ishigami felt he had overdone it. Not only did his speed not decrease, but traction was also lost. Panicking and releasing the throttle would certainly expose weaknesses, so he had to gently release the throttle and wait for traction to recover. However, things did not go as planned. After hitting the guardrail, the GT3 stopped on the track, and subsequent cars passed it, significantly dropping Ishigami's rank to 12th as he rejoined the race. This allowed other drivers to effortlessly move up one position, with Kanata's Toyota 86 rising to 5th place. The pace of the race increased suddenly due to Kaito's action. His coach wanted him to secure 3rd place, given the significant gap with the lead group. However, Kaito felt that racing without a challenge would mean no opportunity for victory. Meanwhile, the Honda NSX and Toyota 86 were battling for 4th place. Kazuhiro did not expect to face Kanata again here. Both had grown stronger since the season opener, but Kazuhiro was still haunted by the psychological shadow Kanata had cast on him. He decided to confront this fear. In the lead group, Sawatari and Michael were about to enter the 3rd section. Although there were no overt attacks, a tense psychological battle was unfolding. Sawatari desperately tried to shake off Michael, but without success. Michael, like a predator, waited for his prey to show a weakness. Back to the second group, Kaito's Ferrari 488 led alone, while the NSX and 86 continued their intense tug-of-war. Although the 86 couldn't overtake due to its lower horsepower, it kept up with the NSX through its superior cornering speed. Ryuji believed that the heavy rain compensated for many of the 86's disadvantages, but its current ranking was likely its limit. Failure in the race's third section would mean losing the entire race. Ultimately, the vehicle's limitations held Kanata back. Ogata shared this sentiment, knowing that if Kanata finished fifth, the prize money could fund a new race car. The lead groups Alpine and Porsche entered the long, straight section. Michael pulled alongside, then fell back, which Sawatari took as a provocation from Michael. Kaito, in third place, arrived late on the straightaway, followed by Kazuhiro's NSX and Kanata's 86. Behind them, Yudai's Audi R8, trailing by 7 seconds, planned to close the gap with the 86 on the uphill. Next came Jackson's Carrera GTS and Shun's GTR, with Shun overtaking the Carrera GTS on the straight, due to his car's superior horsepower. The commentator asked Mr. Ryuji about Shun's performance, noting he was a student of his. Ryuji, however, mentioned that Shun was one of his weakest students due to his overly competitive nature, which often led to mistakes. Ryuji expressed hope that this race might teach Shun a valuable lesson. Meanwhile, Yosuke, Nozomi, and Takuya also entered the long straightaway. At this moment, the rain over the track stopped. Kanata noticed the rain had stopped only because the cars ahead were no longer kicking up as much spray. The reduced water on the track was disadvantageous for him. Even if he could overtake the Honda NSX in the twisty sections, he risked being overtaken on the straights. He needed to build a sufficient lead. Following the three cars, they all passed the start point, with the race entering its final lap. Just then, the commentator received the latest news. Fog was likely to form on the Ashinoko racetrack. After the rain stopped, due to changes in air currents, there was a high probability of fog forming, coinciding almost exactly with the hazardous death zone on the track. The MFG headquarters was in chaos, deploying all available drones. Upon being briefed, Fumihiro issued an order to continue the race and rejected any bans on overtaking, ensuring the competition remained fair. He would take full responsibility for any incidents. The lead group had already entered the foggy area. Sawatari was both surprised and excited upon hearing the race would continue. Drones could no longer capture images in the thick fog, and the following distance was reduced from 3 meters to 1.5 meters. Ogata also informed Kanata about the dense fog ahead. Kanata immediately asked Ogata to prepare the countdown tactic they used in the opening race, planning to overtake the Honda NSX as they entered the fog zone. Ogata was shocked by Kanata's casual approach. Kazuhiro felt it was too reckless to continue racing under these conditions. The moment Kazuhiro slowed down, the 86 accelerated and passed him. Ogata informed Kanata that the gap to the Ferrari was 3.8 seconds. Kanata began projecting the track's image in his mind. As he sped along, the gap narrowed to 3 seconds. His drifting technique, which had set a section record in the preliminaries, allowed the 86 to pull away from the Honda NSX and close in on the Ferrari 488. After Ogata reported the gap to the Ferrari was just 1 second, Kanata started his own countdown. To Kato's astonishment, the 86 swiftly overtook the Ferrari, securing a place on the podium. Ogata then reported a 19-second gap to the Porsche 718 ahead. Kanata realized he could not advance further and needed to widen the gap to the cars behind. Once the thick fog lifted, the Ferrari behind would relentlessly pursue him. He had to establish a sufficient lead before that happened. Drivers continuously entered the death zone shrouded in thick fog. Yosuke's AMG GTR frequently skidded. Despite the heavy fog, no overtaking ban was issued for the race, which Ryuji speculated was a decision by MFG's top officials. In such severe conditions, the physical demand forced all drivers to slow down, but the extent of the slowdown varied based on the driver's skills. Unintentionally, Nozomi had already passed Yosuke. Under these adverse conditions, nearly all drivers clung to the inside track for visibility during turns, except Kanata, who went full throttle, barely skimming the guardrails. The scene shifted back to the lead group. Michael praised Sawatari's performance in the fog. Noting that leading through the fog must have been mentally draining, yet he himself felt no fatigue following behind. Soon, the Alpine A110 and Porsche 718 emerged from the fog area. Ryuji commented that drivers leading in the fog would be more fatigued, whereas those following could adjust their pace by observing the leaders, making it less exhausting for them. Ogata then realized that Kanata, who had been driving solo, had expended more energy than anyone else. At this moment, the Toyota 86 successfully cleared the fog zone. Ogata immediately informed Kanata that the gap to the Ferrari behind was 8.73 seconds. And although there was originally a 27-second gap to the lead group, it had now reduced to 15 seconds. This meant that in the death zone, the 86 was a full 12 seconds faster than the lead group. The camera shifted to Kaito's Ferrari, which also emerged from the fog zone. Kaito was very annoyed upon learning he was about 9 seconds behind the Toyota 86. Although the rain had stopped, the track remained wet and slippery, preventing him from increasing his speed. In the studio, Ryuji considered the 9-second gap very risky, given the clear difference in combat capabilities between the 86 and the Ferrari, which would likely diminish as the track dried. The scene switched to the battle for first place. The Alpine and Porsche reached a hairpin turn, engaging in intense close combat. Sawatari knew exactly where Michael planned to make his move, having seen him rehearse there on the previous lap. Sawatari needed to devise a counter-strategy before reaching that point. As the 86 and Ferrari successively passed the hairpin, the time difference was 8.55 seconds, surprisingly not much reduced. Ryuji analyzed that this segment was a high-speed area, and the very damp track caused this situation. However, he anticipated that the gap would dramatically decrease at some point. Kanata, driving the 86, was pushing hard, continuously drifting through the forest bends, while Kaito, in the Ferrari 488, was still in hot pursuit. Since the rain stopped, the Honda NSX has been unable to catch up with the Ferrari. Kazuhiro is aware that it's not the NSX's fault, but rather that his level does not match those of the other two drivers. Currently, the Ferrari is not visible in the 86's rearview mirror, nor is the 86 in front of the Ferrari. At this moment, their only competitors are themselves. They are pouring all their skills and mental energy into gaining even a 0.1 second advantage. After passing successive checkpoints, the gap between the two is now 8.27 seconds, having closed by only 0.3 seconds. Kanata continues to maintain a pace that competes with the Ferrari. The commentator asks Ryuji about his doubts regarding the driver's abilities, which should be fairly equal. Under the grip-to-weight ratio rules, the difference in cornering speeds shouldn't be significant. Ryuji explains that the disparity is due to tire surface temperature. The friction between the tires and the road surface generates heat, which is usually taken away by rain during conditions like today's downpour. The race has been conducted with suppressed tire temperatures. The 86 maintains a higher tire surface temperature, meaning Kanata has skillfully kept the tires warmer. Another factor is that lighter cars with narrower tires also help increase surface temperature, which is another reason why these two cars are leading. The lead group entered the third segment, and Sawatari finally came up with a plan. He decided to use a tricky maneuver he had honed in France, shaking his car back and forth as Michael prepared to accelerate. This would disrupt the rhythm of the car behind, causing its speed to drop suddenly. This bluffing technique was something Sawatari learned while driving low-power race cars. He realized he had changed significantly, his obsession with winning reaching new heights. As the track segments dwindled, Kanata also entered the third segment. Chasing fiercely, Kaito narrowed the gap with the 86 to 7.19 seconds. The Ferrari 488's traction was gradually recovering. Once the lakeside downhill section ended, the Ferrari 488 was poised for a vigorous pursuit. Meanwhile, another drama unfolded in the forested area behind. Kakeru had caught up with Ishigami, who had been in an accident. The recovery in tire grip gave Kakeru a chance to improve his ranking. Ishigami's Porsche suffered severe suspension damage from the collision, allowing the Lotus to easily overtake in the bends. Although the Porsche was still running, this pace was its limit. The communications team advised Ishigami to withdraw from the race, arguing that retiring due to vehicle damage was not disgraceful. However, Ishigami countered that a driver should strive for every point possible, even if it means embarrassing oneself rather than giving up. The scene shifts to the mid-pack group. Shun's GTR is closely following Yudai's Audi R8. Thanks to the rain-delaying tire wear, Shun's GTR still has strong combat capabilities. The lead group's Alpine A110 and Porsche 718 are about to enter the final long straight section, a critical point in determining their fate. Michael anticipated Sawatari's maneuvers, not giving Sawatari a chance to use his sly trick. Sawatari's tactic intended for victory turned out to be a misstep, allowing the Porsche to proceed unimpeded. The Porsche's renowned PDK transmission undoubtedly outperformed the Alpine, with Michael executing a stunning overtaking move to reclaim the lead. Michael also took the opportunity to praise Sawatari, acknowledging him as the first Japanese driver to truly challenge him in a race. Attention then turns to the battle for third place. The Toyota 86 enters the long straight first, with the Ferrari 488 close behind. The gap between the two cars is just 2.68 seconds. Kanata is in a tight spot, definitely facing an imminent close chase. The key will be how the 86 can prevent being overtaken by the Ferrari, with their ultimate showdown set to occur on an uphill section. The battle for sixth place heats up on the long straight. Shun launches another attack on Yudai, with the GTR accelerating fiercely to pull alongside the Audi R8. As both cars enter the bend together, the GTR drifts outward, hitting the Audi R8. Fortunately, both cars manage to navigate the bend without serious incident. Shun's bold move intimidates Yudai, who becomes noticeably cautious in the next bend. The scene shifts to the battle for third place. The Ferrari 488 is now tightly tailing the Toyota 86. But overtaking is no easy task. Kaito admires Kanata's skillful cornering. Although Kanata doesn't block, Kaito can't find an opportunity to pass, so he decides not to risk a showdown with Kanata on the bends. The focus returns to the lead battle. Sawatari is frustrated, feeling the stark difference between first and second place, despite the slim margin. This is his first time feeling so discontented since joining MFG races. As the race concludes, Michael emerges as the winner, securing his second consecutive victory since the season opener. Back to the intense third-place fight, Kaito finds that when he pushes the throttle, the rear of the Ferrari becomes very twitchy. On this semi-wet surface, it's easy to think the tires will grip, but they can still slip. Kaito decides to settle the battle on the upcoming bend. If he can pull alongside the 86, even Kanata will be powerless to stop him. Kaito delayed braking, hoping to pull alongside in the braking zone, but the 86 entered the turn too quickly. Realizing he couldn't overtake on the entry, Kaito decided to cross lines and settle the battle at the final bend's exit. Once on the straight, the Ferrari's superior power was too much for the 86. In the end, the Ferrari edged ahead by half a car length to claim third place, with Kanata narrowly finishing fourth. After racing 75.9 kilometers, the gap between the two cars was just 50 centimeters. Kaito's impressive chase and Kanata's skillful evasion made their duel overshadow even the battle for first place. The scene shifts to the battle for sixth place. After 4 bends of competition, Yudai eventually backed down, letting Shun pass, claiming his move was a strategic retreat rather than out of fear. Kazuhiro's Honda NSX crossed the finish line in 5th place. Shun's GTR took 6th, followed by Yudai's Audi R8 in 7th, Jackson's Carrera GTS in 8th, Nozomi's Alfa Romeo in 9th, Yosuke's AMG GTR in 10th, Takuya's BMW M6 in 11th, and Kakeru's Lotus in 12th. Ishigami finished bitterly in 13th, and last was Takamitsu, who did not appear in the race footage. With this, the second MFG race, the Ashinoko GT, came to a close. Sawatari controversially asked the race queen Ren for a kiss. Shun, upon seeing this, felt like punching Sawatari. Meanwhile, Kanata's notable performance caught the eye of a race queen who gave him her contact details, which he did not refuse as his mentor had never taught him otherwise. Later, Shun approached Sawatari to make a gentleman's agreement not to pursue Ren, as she was the object of Shun's secret affection. On the other side, Keisuke received instructions from his brother Ryosuke and agreed to let Keisuke's apprentice participate in the MFG races. Regarding why the apprentice did not participate in the opening race, Keisuke explained that since the apprentice is his, entering the race too early would be somewhat unfair, given Ryosuke's strictness with the team. Kanata, as Takumi's apprentice, was allowed to participate because Takumi, being based in the UK, was not privy to the secrets about MFG. Moreover, due to the ranking at Ashinoko, which saw Michael and Sawatari set new track records, the restrictions on Keisuke's apprentice participating were lifted. With the Ashinoko GT just concluded, Kanata began mentally simulating the next race at the Manazuru track, while on the train home from work. In Ogata's repair shop, 3 people were discussing the next race car upgrade plan. Ogata suggested switching the Toyota 86 for a Supra and having Okuyama tune it. However, Kanata was not interested in this suggestion. Therefore, engineer Okuyama decided to install a turbocharger on the 86, boosting it to 300 horsepower. Just then, a yellow Toyota GR Supra drove up. The man who emerged, Sena Moriboshi, introduced himself as Keisuke's apprentice. He came to meet Kanata and mentioned he would be competing in the 3rd MFG race. Sena asked Kanata if he knew their teachers were once teammates, but Kanata said his teacher rarely discussed his experiences in Japan. Hearing this, Sena prepared to leave, looking forward to competing against Kanata. Returning to the earlier topic, Ogata still recommended switching to the Supra, noting its superior horsepower and handling. Plus, changing cars mid-season is allowed within the same brand. Nevertheless, Kanata chose to upgrade the 86. Finally, Okuyama stated that he would respect the driver's decision and promised to optimize the 86 to its best form. On the way home, Ogata explained his insistence on changing cars. He felt guilty because Kanata couldn't fully utilize his skills due to the car's limited horsepower. Ogata was eager to do anything to enhance the car's performance. Okuyama felt that Kanata might be inheriting Takumi's will, or perhaps had a special attachment to the 86. Despite this, he vowed to build an 86 that would not lose to the Supra. Several days later at Zero's garage, Okuyama began the turbo upgrade for the Toyota 86, keeping in mind the characteristics of the next track, Manazuru. He set the qualifying race target at 5th place, but it's uncertain whether the 86 can achieve this rank among many supercars. In Shibukawa City, the trio from the Initial D gas station made a cameo. Kenji remained his usual laid-back self, while Ikutani and Itsuki still worked at the gas station, reminiscing about old times. Elsewhere, Ren asked her mother if there was any news about Kanata's father. Her mother said that although no key information was found, she learned that Ren's father had lived briefly in Gunma Prefecture. With 2 weeks to go until the Manazuru event, Kanata used his earnings to treat Ren's family to a big meal. 1 week before the Manazuru event, the turbocharged Toyota 86 made a striking appearance with its engine hood replaced by a lightweight carbon fiber one. Ogata noted that the car's speed was completely different now, and this was the 86 Kanata had always dreamed of. With such explosive power, he could now keep up with the supercars on the track. Next, Kanata prepared to test the car's top speed. Despite this, Ogata still wondered if the 86, now boosted to 300 horsepower, could really surpass 600 horsepower sports cars. Meanwhile, Kanata tested the new 86's drifting ability on the road. On another note, Ren confided to Kyoko that she liked Kanata. Though shocked, Kyoko still supported Ren. By early July, the 3rd MFG event at Manazuru had finally begun. The racetrack, 17.4 kilometers long, featured 5 laps for the main race. The Manazuru track is known for its complex layout, including a sea-crossing bridge, 3 tunnels, and several multi-level intersections, making it extremely popular among racing fans. Ishigami, driving a GT3, competed on the first day, returning as a challenger due to an accident in the previous race. Kakeru, in his Lotus, also raced today, motivated to catch up with his sister Nozomi, who had become stronger than him. On the second day of the qualifying race, Daigo drove his Lamborghini out of a tunnel. The dazzling light made him feel that overtaking was nearly impossible on this track, thus securing a good position in the qualifiers became crucial. Meanwhile, Kanata was watching the qualifying race. Ogata worried about Kanata facing difficulties on his 3rd day appearance, but Kanata felt indifferent. He was ready to test the new 86's capabilities on the track. Back to the race, Yosuke drove his AMG GTR, but held back due to fear of making mistakes. After the second day of qualifiers, the provisional rankings were announced. That evening, Kanata simulated driving in his room. Unexpectedly, it began to rain on the third day, and the race schedule, including Kanata's appearance, was cancelled. Consequently, he and Ren decided to head to work together. On the fourth day of qualifying, the weather cleared up. As a rookie in his first year of competition, Kanata surprisingly ranked 5th on the leaderboard after the first 2 races. At this time, Nozomi approached Kanata and gave him a charm for good luck. Kanata drove the 8-6 to the starting line, where Ogata informed him via radio that the hardest parts of the track were the bridge and tunnel areas, where visibility was completely obstructed. As they spoke, the 8-6 entered the tunnel. As he was about to exit, the sudden burst of bright light made it difficult for Kanata to see. The constant change between light and dark was particularly draining for drivers. Just as his eyes adjusted to the light, another tunnel section approached. Entering the tunnel, drivers couldn't see the road conditions, and any slight mistake in line control could lead to an accident. However, this was still too easy for Kanata. Soon, he approached a high-speed S-curve, where precise speed calculation was necessary. Kanata drove the 8-6 through a high-speed drift around the curve. To the astonishment of Shun and Ogata, Kanata smoothly conquered this challenge and was notably faster than before. He drifted through the checkpoint and impressively secured 3rd place. Shun was shocked to learn that the 8-6 only had 300 horsepower, as just a 100 horsepower increase yielded such remarkable performance. As he passed the next checkpoint, Kanata moved up to 2nd place, surpassing Daigo's pace. Approaching the heart of the track, the 8-6 unleashed its full power on the low-speed sections. Ishigami's record was about to be broken by him. Shun marveled that Kanata, despite racing this track for the first time, could preemptively choose the correct lines. The 8-6 sped along the residential district and was about to reach the sea-level area. After passing the checkpoint, the 8-6 moved into the lead. Sawatari remarked that Kanata was indeed a monster, while Michael remained indifferent as usual. Kanata drove the 8-6 through the peninsula area and was now heading towards the inland area. He not only maintained the lead, but also significantly broke the record in the peninsula area. Kanata maximized the use of the track space to gain speed. As he passed through the last tunnel, he was nearing the finish line. Driving the turbocharged GT86, Kanata set an astonishing new track record. Ogata was very pleased with this result, but Kanata mentioned that the final standings would probably align with what Okuyama had predicted, once other drivers had their turn. Sawatari's qualifying race had also begun. Ogata mentioned that this young racer nearly pushed Michael to the brink in his last race. Moreover, Kanata had been overtaken by this car during a test drive, and he knew then that this driver was highly skilled. However, only Sawatari knew why he was now so driven. It was Kanata's arrival that had reawakened his competitive spirit. He temporarily took the lead by beating Kanata's record from the previous day by 0.1 seconds, a gap created during gear shifting, as paddle shifters are faster than gear sticks. At that moment, Shun was amazed at how Sawatari could control the car as if it were part of his own body. As the Alpine crossed the finish line, Sawatari improved the track record by 0.2 seconds, but was still not satisfied with his performance. Then it was Shun's turn to compete, but he struggled on the twisty sections of the track and did not perform well. Following him, Kazuhiro and Yudai competed, while Takuya switched his BMW M6 for an M4 DTM, realizing the bulky M6 was not agile enough for tight corners and needed a change to avoid elimination. Kaito, driving a Ferrari, was determined to prove he was no less talented than any prodigy. On the 6th day of qualifying, Sena, driving a Toyota GR Supra, was in 7th place. He believed that the so-called elite prodigies were all worthless and that a true racer needed innate talent for road racing. As Keisuke's apprentice, he was set to defend his abilities in this race. His Toyota Supra, a masterpiece by Ryosuke's ace engineer Matsumoto, was painted the same color as Keisuke's Mazda RX-7. On the final day of qualifying, Jackson competed in a Carrera GTS. Meanwhile, Ren was out shopping with her best friend, planning to buy a charm for Kanata. Back at the racetrack, Michael, the fastest driver, was the finale performer again. The white Porsche stood out under Manazuru's sky. This was Michael's second time competing at Manazuru, but his formidable skill meant he had no need to feel nervous. In the final moments, Michael surpassed the lap records of other drivers and continued to secure pole position. As a result, the final rankings of the Manazuru qualifying race were determined. Kanata finished 3rd, Sina 8th, and Shun 12th. There was a rest day between the qualifying race and the main race. During the rest day, Ren arranged to go out on a date with Kanata, planning to give him the charm. However, she was surprised to find that Kanata already had a charm. Kanata explained it was a gift from another driver. Learning it was from a female driver, Ren felt jealous. But Kanata assured her it was just a gesture of camaraderie among competitors. Upset, Ren threw the charm at Kanata and ran off just as a train was arriving. Overwhelmed by sadness, she fainted on the train tracks. Fortunately, the train stopped in time, and neither Kanata nor Ren was injured. Back home, Kanata relayed the incident to Ren's mother, downplaying the danger but lying about one thing. When he jumped onto the platform, he hit his arm against something hard, and the pain was worsening. Kanata wondered if he would be able to operate the gear shift in tomorrow's race. The next day, the Manazuru event proceeded as scheduled. The race featured a special guest, Mr. Wataru, who had helped greatly in establishing MFG, and currently served as a member of the MFG Operations Committee. Injured, Kanata faced the Manazuru main race and had no choice but to confess to Ogata and Okuyama about his condition, especially the intense pain during gear shifting. Kanata thought he could only shift directly from 1st to 3rd gear. Fortunately, steering was not a problem. However, without the ability to shift gears quickly, how could he compete against drivers with paddle shifters? Ogata, considering the risk of worsening the injury, suggested that Kanata withdraw from the race. Okuyama, however, believed the decision should be left to the driver. Kanata felt that only by participating could he know his true potential, and that quitting midway was not an option for someone aspiring to be a legendary driver. With no other options, Ogata simply advised Kanata not to overexert himself. Kanata then handed the charm Nozomi had given him to Ogata for safekeeping, hoping Ren's deity would protect him. With only 5 minutes to the scheduled start of the race, Wataru was particularly interested in the performance of the two rookies today. Sena in the 8th starting position, and Kanata in the 3rd. With 15 seconds to count down, 15 cars gradually entered a pitch-black tunnel. As the signal lights changed, all vehicles began to sprint at full power. Kaito was puzzled to see Kanata also making a gear-shifting error. Shifting directly from 1st to 3rd gear caused a significant drop in RPMs. If the RPMs didn't exceed 4,500, acceleration would be sluggish, no match for the supercars. The pain in his arm made it difficult for Kanata to cope, and he was overtaken by Ishigami, dropping to 5th place. Up ahead, a high-speed S-curve was approaching. The 8-6 managed to overtake again by delaying braking and drifting. The leading group was about to encounter a 180-degree hairpin turn, marking the beginning of the inland area's first half. Suddenly, the 8-6 stalled, nearly causing Ishigami to crash into it. Wataru, who had once driven the 8-6, thought its behavior was odd. The acceleration was notably slow in the low-speed area after 1st gear, likely indicating a gearbox issue. Kanata was now using 3rd and 4th gears, which could maintain a relative speed even if a Lamborghini caught up. However, once the race truly began, his elbow pain would become unbearable when exerting force. The leaders raced towards the old station along the track, and after turning, entered the peninsula area. The gaps between the drivers widened due to differences in performance. At this point, a Lamborghini had caught up to the 8-6. Daigo was puzzled by the 8-6's slow pace today, but there was no room to overtake on such a narrow track. Sawatari asked the radio operator about the 8-6's ranking. The radio responded that the 8-6's rank was continually dropping, suspecting a gearbox fault. However, Sawatari couldn't believe that a manual transmission car would easily malfunction and felt frustrated. He had planned to use Kanata to counter Michael, but now that seemed impossible. The Yajikita siblings successfully passed a Nissan GTR using a sandwich formation. Meanwhile, the racers were navigating through the forest on the peninsula. The leading group was about to exit the forest and reach sea level. The gap between the front and middle groups was not as large as expected. Wataru suspected that Michael was not running at full capacity. calculating the distance to the cars behind while adjusting his pace. Michael's racing style is to avoid unnecessary risks, especially since the race was on a dry surface, requiring consideration of tire wear. Wataru mentioned he did not like Michael's style. Though strong, it lacked excitement. At that moment, a Honda NSX charged up, running side by side with an Audi R, neither yielding. The NSX gained half a car length at the next bend, completing the overtake. Kazuhiro moved up to 9th place. Daigo also noticed that the 8.6 seemed unable to use second gear, as it was slow on uphill sections. He decided to try overtaking at the transition between an uphill and downhill. At that moment, Okayama looked troubled. Kanata had perfectly mastered the peninsula area during the qualifying race, but today, it would be his biggest weakness due to the need for second and third gears. Daigo planned to make his move at the upcoming T-junction. He successfully overtook from the side, moving up to 5th place. Kanata, usually strong in the peninsula area, kept falling behind. Wataru, from just the recent scene, deduced that the 8.6 couldn't use second gear. Using third gear in a second gear section might seem simple, but it actually meant facing a despairing lack of torque. The gearbox issue ironically highlighted Kanata's potential. The leading group had reached the latter part of the inland area. At this point, Takuya, driving a BMW M4, passed Kanata. Although Takuya felt that such an overtake was not ideal, it was still a race, and the confrontation on the bends would have to wait until next time. Ogata checked on Kanata's condition, but Kanata only replied that he was fine, likely too in pain to even talk properly. Yet, despite this, he still managed to accelerate and catch up to the M4. Takuya was completely unprepared for Kanata to make a move there. Both cars charged into the tunnel together. Unable to counteract the lateral G-forces, Takuya's 500 horsepower was ineffective. Ahead, the road narrowed to half its width. Positioned on the outside, the M4 opted to yield, allowing the 8.6 to reclaim 6th place. Sena was shocked by Kanata's aggressive driving on the high-speed sections, truly living up to his reputation as another proud successor from Gunma Prefecture. While it is commonly believed that Kanata excels in low-speed areas, Wataru disagreed. In the past 2 races, Kanata was hindered by his car's lack of power and couldn't keep up with his opponents, forced to make his moves on downhill, low-speed bends. However, reflecting on this race, he had boldly attacked in risky areas where other drivers hesitated. The notion that someone with Kanata's formal elite training only excels in low-speed areas clearly doesn't hold. As the 8.6 navigated a 180-degree bend, the M4 behind took advantage of the moment Kanata shifted gears to overtake him. Kanata's ranking gradually fell as other drivers passed him. What should he do next? Withdraw or counterattack? Stay tuned for Season 3, Inai.